or not to be? That is the question. Ever kissed a skull? Welcome, fantastic YouTube subscribers, to our second edition of some wonderful home learning. We'll just bring the camera down slightly. So today we're going to be chatting predominantly to my wonderful year 12 and 13 students, giving them some advice on some home style learning quizzing for episode 8 of the Machinal. So that's our section B, B1 and B2, remembering that B1 is all about performer and B2 is all about designer. So there are a few things I want to go over, leading on slightly to episode 9, but focusing first on episode number 8. And just a few things I want you to remember. So this is key knowledge that if you haven't got, jot down at this very minute. So remember, the first thing is that obviously the young woman has come from this this suppressed lifestyle with her husband, and she's moving from the idea of like the patriarchal society into this newfound bureaucratic society. Really quickly in your books though, have a look back from the last time that we met and have a little think about the ways in which names evolve and change throughout all of the episodes, and thinking to episode 8 how her name is referenced for the first time. And it's interesting that this act of freedom is used by Treadwell to showcase how she's going from this sense of patriarchal society into one of bureaucracy. So the first thing I wanted to look at, and forgive me for looking at my wonderful notes, is the analysis of the confession. So let's make a few bullet points within our learning of the analysis of the confession, which is something we went over, but I just want to make sure that they are clear in our notes. So ironically, it's Richard Roe which opens Helen's world to the possibility of freedom and choices, and we see that in episode 5 particularly, how he kind of exposes her to the world in which she thinks that she can have. That's the irony, is the fact that actually he who gives her freedom becomes the person which takes it away now. And we know that within episode 8, the hugest turning point is the affidavit which he signs. So that irony comes from the fact that he gives her freedom, but he also takes it away. And it's interesting, remember that it is the man who gives her the freedom, it's the man which takes her freedom away. And for Helen, Richard specifically is a representation of freedom and escape. And we know that back when they first meet in the speakeasy, that place of kind of prohibited space, that he's already travelled across the world. He talks about the murder in Mexico, and how that confession isn't kind of put into the court of law, but ultimately her confession now is one which kind of sends her in a spiral to the end of the end of episode 9. So just make sure that in that episode 8 you've got that affidavit really highlighted clearly, which we did last time we met, and the idea that he supplied her with the bowl which was filled with pebbles. And again, remembering that pebbles are our key symbol which reoccurs throughout this play. My first task would be obviously to write down the notes that I'm discussing, but to go through the play and just highlight where pebbles are referenced from episodes 1 to 8. And you can go on to 9 if you wish, but 1 to 8, thinking about how the symbols of pebbles are referenced. And this is going to come up in our B2 realistically, about how you would enhance that symbol particularly for your audience. So you might look at how lighting would be used when pebbles are referenced, and you might have a reoccurring piece of lighting which is used throughout to expose and enhance, highlight, reference that symbol for your key audience. So I think it's also interesting to think of this freedom which he gives her, which Roe gives her throughout the play, and which he again takes away, only exists for a man as well. So that's just something that Treadwell really referenced. So that needs to come up in our B2 piece of context. And we know that, and forgive me for looking down at my notes, it says here, at the end of the play we learn that Roe is still enjoying freedom and is now a resident of the Republic of Mexico. He is not bound by societal rules or expectations. He is openly admitted to killing the 2 bandits, yet he is not made to appear in court for his actions, whereas she is. So that really comes back to that key theme of that this is a man's world, and that Helen, although he is exposed to her sense of freedom, is almost taking it away. And again, we went through before as well, is that how in episode 8 her physicality, her posture, her vocals diminish throughout the episode, up until the affidavit. So I would, again, my second task would be to go through episode 8 and to think about how my vocal and physical skills might adhere to her showing strength. So her posture might be high, her voice might be loud, she might be making direct eye contact with the judge and the jurors in this male-dominated bureaucratic environment. But then as soon as she hears that the affidavit was signed by Roe, I feel like at that minute that everything else needs to crumble. That's the time where hope throughout 8 episodes is slashed in half. She loses hope at that moment. So if you're thinking about a B1 question at this point, you might think about using the part when the affidavit is exposed in court, about how you would use your physicality, how would you use your voice at that moment. So episode 8 task, go through the episode of episode 8, have a think about how you would show her still gaining and gunning for hope until the affidavit is signed, and then as soon as the affidavit is signed, I want you to show her crumbling and kind of diminishing in her stance. Okay, and that's where she admits it. As soon as she hears the affidavit, everything that she feels, all that hope is lost, and she shouts, "I did it," which is a real incredible thing for her to do. It's brave, it's courageous for her to kind of just admit it, for this thing, whatever this thing is, this sense of hope to be over. Because no matter how much she tries to go against society, she's still subject to societal laws and is doomed before she even tries. And that's where the idea of hope diminishes. But again, it comes back to Treadwell's context, where men, on the other hand, are not subject to these same rigid laws. And Roe's a real good reflection of that. And this knowledge is really key for our B2 knowledge. She has to provide her innocence in a court of law which is all dominated by men. Women were not used for jury service at this time, so again it's coming back to that male-dominated environment which Treadwell was focusing on, key context for B2. She's questioned by male judges, by male lawyers, and again, that affidavit, it seals her fate. And I think it's quite cruel of what Roe does. Like he is honest with his response to it. He doesn't confess to him loving her at all throughout this play. He's really clear that, you know, she is beautiful like all of the other women which he's met, and he's really honest about that. However, I think that he offers her a sense of hope and then he cruelly strips it away. And it's when that she loses this hope that she then confesses. It comes back to the idea of the machine eradicating emotions, the hope disappearing. She submits to the power of the machine, is what I wrote on my notes. The machine in the courtroom lacks any hope, and the reaction to her confession and her reasoning why she did it, why she didn't get the divorce, and almost them laughing at her, seems brutal and cruel at this moment where she is submitting to the capabilities of the machine. And it just reflects how the machine has no sense of sympathy for her. So there's quite a lot of knowledge there, just recapping. I'm not adding anything new for today, just recapping on our episode 8 context. I would then again think of you as a performer. How would you react as an actress at the moment the affidavit is signed? What sort of things would you reflect? So you might talk about your language becoming more disparate, more truncated, more clipped, your volume diminishing, your posture eradicating. Before you had like really direct eye contact, whereas now you're like flittering. You're hesitant on your words to show that lack of hope, taking time to respond to the questions, which from the judge should be quite rapid and fiery, to focus on that machine-like context. And again, thinking about where they're laughing at her as well near the end of the episode, how as an actress would you react to that moment? Would you expose that cruelty, or would you just let that cruelty happen? Which leads us on to my next session, which I'll be looking at episode 9. So plenty to be getting on with today. Listen to the video, take lots of notes, create a revision poster for this episode like we've done for all the others. Tidy up our notes for episode 8, no new content coming today, and then focus on you as an actress. What physical performance skills would you use once the affidavit is signed, once she hears that it was Roe that kind of put her into this predicament, and then when the jury laugh at her. Tell me how you would respond to those moments, and then drop me an email with your response. Okay, wonderful to speak to you today. Adios.